Are you seeing Quinlan Tarkintown rising at your tables and looking for a way to beat it? Or maybe you're looking for a new mid-range aggro disruption deck to take on the meta. What's up, guys? KTOD Maddie here, hitting you with a Patreon deep dive. That's right, this is going to Patreon first, YouTube in a couple weeks, where we take a look at Quinlan Tarkintown, a deck that I've had success with and that I really like. I think it lines up to some of the better decks in the meta, and it can be one that gives you a lot of options in how to navigate the popular decks right now. So let's take a look. All right, so this is where I am at with my Quinlan Tarkintown deck. A couple cards I want to highlight. 3 main deck Kira, 3 main deck Spark. We are really trying to disrupt our opponent's game plan after we take a big lead with an early ping into Tarkintown. Red 3 is going to cement some really nice aggro lines. And cards like L3 can be really impactful against a lot of these ping decks that are trying to set you back as well. So why did I pick this deck? One of the reasons I picked Quinlan Tarkintown is I wanted to be playing a 5 deploy force leader, so I could play force throw. I think that card's really freaking good, especially right now. And then again, I like that disruption package. I like playing things like Waylay. I like playing things like Spark Rebellion. And I thought this deck has a lot of insane reach with Cassian and Falcon paired with things like Surprise Strike, and you can really get them ahead. And then in Attrition Wars, what I really like is some of the smuggle cards that we talked about that are able to, when you start to play at parity, you're still going to have things that you can still squeak out there and create some interesting threats. So that's why I'm playing it. That's some of the highlights, and we're going to go into some of the matchups and how it navigates them. So again, looking at this deck, we are really trying to set our opponent back and then strip their hand of some of the popular plays. That's why we're playing, all our 4-drops kind of do that. And so we're going to be looking first at a popular matchup. We'll look at Bosk, right? So what this deck wants to be doing against Bosk is it's obviously the aggressor in that matchup. One video that should come out soon on my side channel is, or probably already dropped actually, thinking of the timeline, this will go to YouTube, is Know Your Role. Here, in a lot of matchups, we're going to be kind of doing an interesting hybrid where we're the control first and then the aggro. Against something like Bosk, we are the aggressor. We're taking this on the play. We are trying to attack them and disrupt their plan of drawing cards and gaining life. So, against them, discard is super important. And here's the thing I noticed about this Bosk deck is outside of Chilton, it's playing like Avengers and Snokes. So what you want to do against them is get rid of those cards. Let them kill your units, because as long as they're not drawing cards or gaining life, that's a caveat there with the bounties. But you want to put a premium on getting rid of their threats. And then if you strip their hand with these cards that I'm talking about, their Chiltons become less impactful, less scary, and you have Tarkintown to kind of deal with the first one, right? So another card that might not seem amazing would be Waylay. Waylaying one of your own units that has a bounty on it is super impactful there, because you're going to try to prevent them from getting those fat double bounties when they deploy their leader. And also just in general, you're trying to strip them of cards, so when they death mark something, you do not want them to play that card. So you're going on the play and you're really pushing the envelope, and you're trying to thwart their kind of late game threats. Another nice thing about this list is Plo Koon can line up nicely to take out their leader. Yeah, you might not always have coordinate online, but you can usually get chip damage on a 6 health leader and take it out that way as well. And then he'll live on the swing back, right? So that's really nice. And then out of the board, I am running 2 power failures right now. Could easily beat Bamboozle. Another card I see people trying is the Wolf Pack, the 1-drop chip. I think that can be good too. And it does ping 1 cost for other matchups. I am finding that guy's still really easy to kill, and they can put bounties on him as well. So rather than do that, I want things like Shadowed Intentions that I'm trying out. Make something stickier, make something problematic, and then using cards like Bamboozle. I'm floating between 1 and 2 here. The reasoning there is this deck doesn't really draw extra cards It can smuggle things. I almost said snuggle. It can smuggle things, which then leaves you up a card, so you can use the bamboozle, which is nice. It's kind of like card draw. Shout out to Hondo, who did that well. But I'm opting for power failure right now. It shuts off Chilton. It shuts off some other matchups like another Quinlan Green that's going to be suiting up their own guy. And then obviously we have the pillage. Things that are going to come out, things like your daring raid, right? Things that are not going to be so impactful against them early. And you're really trying to push the envelope. That's why I only have 3 7-drops. I think we need to be a little more aggressive there. All right, so the next matchup I want to talk to is Sabine. One, I feel pretty comfortable in this deck. I think this deck lines up pretty well to fight Sabine. And a big reason for that is the early ping into Tarkintown. You can go on the draw against them pretty effectively and just use that as your first turn play. Something to be careful of is if they're on R2 and they want to R2 into Wing Leader, that could be really problematic because you don't get the ping. Although you can, suicide a Sabine in there and then still get the Tarkintown, then ping out their next drop. So you'll be okay. So one thing about this matchup is that you want to be getting ahead early with Tarkintown and then putting the pressure on them. You can kind of go wide against them and land a good amount of units, and then using things like Kira on turn 4 to name Poe so they can't ECL it, or if you're able to nab initiative for turns like 5 and 6, sparking out those plays, because you're going to really use things like Red 3 and some of your pumps to just go ahead and beat them before they can beat you. So the nice thing about this deck is that it can kind of swerve from an early control into the aggressor, and then they're playing catch up with you. And then if they do use something like an early ECL on one of your guys, you have the ping and the Tarkintown to combine it. So one common line that I saw, I play a Sabine or an A-Wing, I ping Tarkintown. The next turn, I play Ezra. They ECL to get rid of Ezra because it's super scary, which would usually be something like K2. Then I can play my own K2 or Akira to ping out their 4-drop, and then I'm still getting super ahead there. Against Sabine, as you can see, the sideboard is really geared towards control. So against Sabine, I still like adding in a waylay and a K2. We're probably getting rid of some of our top end, so we can even look to like bamboozle or power failure, depending on if they're on the dark saber. They probably will be. So those are good options there. Again, once you learn the lines and kind of how the decks match up, you should be good against Sabine. It's just knowing the new lens. Like, we are actually trying to race them. We are trying to put the pressure on them there. So that's what you want to do. And then again, identifying that key turn. Their 5 resource turn can be very problematic, and also their 6. So keep those discard effects as you draw them late and really get them off that game plan. And then if they try to nab you with the saber, we're bringing in bamboozles and power failures and stuff like that, getting rid of some of our top end, and we should be able to fight them pretty effectively. All right, in the last main matchup I want to talk about before I go into some general topics about other decks you'll see, but I really want to focus on the main 3, and that'll be Jango. Obviously, Jango's probably one of, if not the best deck right now in the format, and it presents a lot of problems, and I think this deck can fight it, but has an uphill climb. We might need to start hedging a little more there. So, obviously, the main deck daring raids are a concession for Jango. All of the 3/2 ships that he has at his disposal. Falcon is an all-star here. Yeah, it doesn't value trade the 3/2 ping ship, P38, I believe it's called, but it still takes it out. So when you see your space, you want to really gear towards that. You're mulliganing for daring raid or space, because if you don't get it, you're probably cooked, and they're gonna remove your first thing unless you start with L3. So this is a really tough matchup. Those are your early start MVPs, and then as the game progresses, if you're able to kind of put yourself in a pretty good spot, you're going to lean on your sparks and your discard effect to stop them from playing their triple dark raid or some of their bigger ships, because that's really where they kind of finish the game out. And just knowing that they have a lot of pumps in hand. So again, you're the control deck. It's okay. There's a nuance with the draw, and why I might start playing something like an R2, the one drop R2, is if you go on the draw and they play the one, like something like a Greedo, you're kind of hurting. You're pretty far behind. So I'm okay going on the play here, realizing that unless I start with L3, they're gonna kill my first turn play. But again, we've identified the cards that we need to mulligan for, so we should be able to catch back up. We are the control deck. We do not want to have them landing their pumps. And so, anytime we can, kill their units and value trade there, we're going to do that, and we're going to strip cards from their hand. Jango is pretty sticky, right, with 7 health, so we want to save a surprise strike to try to take him out. And again, around that turn, he might try to put a flamethrower on it, so we have to be very careful that we, can play around that. So again, I think we have the tools. We might want to look for more space in our sideboard. So if you're playing against Jango and you're having some trouble, look to, some of the, like Azatuk kind of comes on late, but it can still fight there. Look to adding another Daring Raid. You might want to have open fires in the sideboard. We might really need some of that space, and so you might want to lose some of the cards that we've teched against control, because the sideboard is obviously very control heavy. So that's in your testing, that's somewhere I would look if you're having trouble. We're bringing in bamboozles and waylays, because, and this is where like 2 bamboozles kind of better. One interesting thing is like bamboozle, if they triple dark raid, you can just use the bamboozle and tap it down, so you're gonna save a lot of health there. And again, like Han's a tough one, because you want to obviously try to kill their Jango, but what I found is you're not really getting to play him that much, so that might be one that you want to cut. Really, again, like the ethos here is we're the control. We are trying to save up. Like, you don't want to just tap out into them and curve out, because they have a lot of cheap ways to kind of maneuver that. And then their turn 4, or their 4 resource turn 3, that's one where you're going to want to try to spark them or get initiative right away and play Kira, because that's when they can triple dark raid, a 6 drop out, right? So just kind of understanding the plays that they're going for and how to combat them will be really important. So discard's important, and playing around triple dark raid, and if you're having trouble, up the daring raids, get the Azatuks in there, and get a little more space presence. All right, now some general matchups on the whole. Another popular deck is Quinlan Green. Quinlan Green can present an interesting problem in that it ramps, and so when you're a deck that's playing against ramp and you do not have that option, they're going to get their leader out first. They're going to get to some of the green hero top end, like home one, that can kind of close the game out, especially if they get to play multiples. U-Wing reinforcement can also be problematic, so what we want to do in that matchup is obviously lean on our discard. If they're ramping, there's less cards in hand. Things like pillage out of the sideboard become really good. We want to be able to spark some of those key plays that they can cheat out early with, like a General's Blade, or even better, spark their ramp, and then they become pretty anemic. So the premium there is going to be discard, using things like Power Failure and Bamboozle out of the sideboard to fight their General's Blade, discard out of the sideboard to fight the fact that they'll have less cards. It's a tough matchup, and one that you really need a game plan, and that would be the discard plan against them. And so one thing that I would do is just try to keep initiative and try to keep them off their game plan. I'd focus more on their hand and thwarting their game plan than fighting on the board with the ping and the early Tarkintown. So I would actually take the play here. In the past, I've taken the draw, but I think the play is better to keep the initiative and keep the disruption up. Another matchup that I want to talk about is Anakin. Still pretty popular. I think that we're in a good spot. I've had a good record against Anakin, and I don't think you have to do anything crazy. I think the deck just lines up really well. Obviously, the deck plays Force units and Force Throw and Sabers, so that's something you have to be wary of, is just making sure that they're not able to get some value plays. So even though we are kind of the aggressor, right, we have an earlier deploy and less total base health and a lot of pumps, we do want to pressure them, but we want to take the time to clean up any plays, like get to that level 2 thinking, think of like, what can they be doing against me, oh, they want to untap for a Saber on Yoda. Okay, let's make sure if we don't have a waylay, we just take care of that thing. And then just navigating their flip. Obviously, if they're at a high light base total, Anakin becomes a real problem. We don't have as many ways main deck to deal with him. So we just want to make sure that around that flip turn, we are mathing out how big he'll be on flip, and sometimes just playing to the board first and letting him flip, and then we're ahead on board. We can, use a pump to take him out, or kind of 2 attacks, because he's not the hardest thing to remove, unless he gets really sabered up. And so things like Han, claiming initiative after like a flip and Haning him away and getting that first strike damage can be really good. Discard and waylays are always good against a deck like this that wants to tap out and play Luke's and Obi-Wan's. So again, stick to the plan. I think this is a deck that you shouldn't have to worry about too much. And then post board, we still have that removal. The discard suite for them. So that should line up well, honestly. And then Yellow Han, another deck we line up well too. You can take the initiative. They're usually going to eke out a 3-drop. So what we really want to do is just, if it ends up being Bodhi, we just take it out cleanly with our 2-drop. Maybe, knowing that they could turn 1 Bodhi, we want to get rid of some of their, some of our events, right? Our non-unit cards, just to play around that and give them less value, because the less amount of value that they can get, that benefits us. And then obviously they want to be doing things like DJing and cunning. So playing around that, naming DJ with Kira, killing units so they can't pump them. And you can use, between Plo and stuff like that, and the pumps, like we can deal with Han pretty quickly. So just kind of leaving resources up and being able to interact with them, so with their control in that matchup as well. All right, y'all, so that's my breakdown on Quinlan Tarkintown and some of my thoughts on how to play the deck. Here's my list again. Here's where I'm at. Some cards I've considered adding. Another Daring Raid in the 60 to deal with our friend Jango. Open fires if we're having trouble again with Jango or some other aggressive strategies. Waffling between 2 and 1 Bamboozle and Power Failure. I'm just trying both out to see how they work. Wolfpack, the 1-drop chip, can be very good against Bosk, although I'm not sure we need it. So when looking at the deck, another card that I didn't talk about would be Tech. I think Tech can still be really good in some of these attrition matchups. So, like we always say, the deck is more than 50. It's more than 60. There's these bubble cards that you need to keep trying out. And so I would steer you towards some of those that I mentioned. Let me know in the comments and in the Discord, what are some of your bubble cards? What are cards you're trying out? I know some people have talked about the Rebel package. I think that could be really good. I'm liking it in Fennec. So is that something you're trying out? I'd encourage you to. So yeah, just let me know where you're at with the deck and some of your thoughts on it, and I'd love to hear them.